The big shots at the Space and Rocket Center are getting ready to celebrate one of America's greatest
January is going to be a
moments
busy month at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. NASA is preparing to celebrate 50 years in space. On January 31st, 1958, NASA's first satellite roared into orbit. NASA is preparing to celebrate 50 years in space.
A lot of people try to tell the story of NASA without telling the story of the Army, and that's a grave mistake. The Army was the foundation for NASA here in Huntsville, and you just can't tell one story without telling the other. That's the beginning of the story.
This is The Big Picture, an official television report of the United States Army.
Today's Big Picture will reveal the dramatic, suspenseful story of how the Army, when the prestige of the United States throughout the world had been shaken by events beyond its control, stirred the hearts and emotions of the American people with an epic display of scientific and technical teamwork.
Well, it looks like the Russians are very well aware of the capabilities of rockets. I believe they are working hard at it, and I still hope that we'll be first up there, of course, but I think we have no time to lose.
During that time in October 1957, when Sputnik was launched, there happened to be a meeting in Huntsville between the Huntsville people, the Secretary of Defense designate, McElroy. They had a cocktail evening. While we were sitting together, joking and having a good time, all of a sudden our public affairs officer, Gordon Harris, came into the room with his arms up, and he said, "The Russians have launched a satellite." And then von Braun, he said to McElroy, who was sitting next to him, "Mr. Secretary, if I had been given the word, we could have done that a year ago."
What the Sputnik signal means, we still don't know. The Russians haven't said anything about that.
But I'm convinced that the Russian concept, that's as demonstrated by Sputnik #2 carrying this animal, they consider the control of space around the Earth very much like, shall we say, the great maritime powers considered the control of the seas in the 16th to the 18th century. And they say if we want to control this planet, we have to control the space around it.
A sudden meeting has been called by General John B. Medeiros, Commanding General of the Army Ballistic Missile Agency.
Good morning, gentlemen. Be seated, please. I have a very important announcement for you. We've been assigned the mission of launching a scientific Earth satellite. And we will use the Jupiter-C configuration as a carrier that we developed along with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I promised the Secretary of the Army that we would be ready in 90 days or less. Let's go, Werner.
It was not until Friday, January 31st, that the weather cleared sufficiently for General Medeiros to order launch at 10:30 p.m.
Generator setting. 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire command. Fire command. Ignition. Mainstay. Lift off. Lift off.
The missile is in flight, but the success of its mission is still in doubt. It will take another hour and a half to know whether the satellite is in orbit.
Hello, Len. You can send this off to the Secretary, that our satellite is definitely on orbit. Now get that off, and then I'll give you the figures in a few minutes. Okay, boy.
A packed auditorium of reporters, radio and TV interviewers heard the announcement of Dr. Richard Porter, chairman of the IGY committee.
A scientific Earth satellite was placed in orbit at 5 seconds after 10:55 p.m.
Just one more, came the inevitable plea from the photographers. And exhausted as they were, the trio obliged with what was to be the page one spread in newspapers all over the world. And wherever the news went, it had an effect of transcendent importance. The scientific and technical prestige of the United States was enhanced. People everywhere knew the free world would not be left behind in the all-important race toward outer space. Now, Americans could once again look up toward their future with faith and with confidence.
My friends, there was dancing here in the streets of Huntsville when our first satellite orbited the Earth. I'd like to ask you, don't hang up your dancing slippers.